All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started. There may be some folks popping on while I'm starting, so if I stop talking for a minute, that is why. But I'm just going to do a short introduction about our organization. If you're unfamiliar with who we are, thanks for joining us. If you are new to learning about our organization, we're super excited to have Brennan Marks here. This is round two for him. He did a presentation for us last month on-site water treatment systems. So if you missed that, check out our website and our YouTube pages. That is there for you to listen in on as well. And we will also have this presentation recorded as you heard. So if you want to look back on some of the things that we talked about, you can review that as well and share it with your friends and family and all your neighbors in the watershed. All right, so we'll get going. My name is Lindsay Ayers. I'm a staff member at the Canandaigua Lake Watershed Association. I've been there for a little over 5 years and I absolutely love working there. So I'm excited to share all this types of information of things we can do to help preserve, protect, and restore Canandaigua Lake. This evening's presentation is called Safeguarding Canandaigua Lake on Innovative Stormwater Solutions for a Cleaner Future. And again, presented by Brennan Marks. So our mission is to inspire the entire watershed community and beyond to be stewards of Canandaigua Lake through education, scientific research, and advocating sound public policy. We want to do this by engaging all stakeholders because we all play a role in preserving, protecting, and restoring the lake. Oh, 1 second. So some other upcoming events we have, check out our website. These should all be on there and we'll have them plugged in on Facebook as well and come through on our e-news, but these are a few of the things on the horizon. We have Ontario County Soil and Water joining us at end of April at the Wood Library to talk about some of their projects, as well as an Earth Day cleanup in partnership with the Rotary and a rainbow workshop with Ontario County Soil and Water. We do one with them every year and those are fabulous. So they fill up quickly, but stay tuned and keep an eye on our website for further information there. But again, there's many ways for you to be involved. Become a member if you are not. Get some gift memberships. Take the Lake Friendly Living Pledge. You can find out more about that on our website as well. Sign up for our e-news, volunteer, and whatever skills you feel you can offer to help protect the lake. Please reach out at any time, and you can learn more about everything on our website, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube pages. All right, let me see here. And I think I have a couple more folks to let in. And I think that's it. So I'm going to turn it over to Brennan. Before I do that, just a couple housekeeping. If you could kindly keep yourself on mute, just so we don't have any background noise. And if you have questions, pop them into the chat, and Brennan will either answer them throughout, or we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. All right. Well, I will stop my share, and I'll allow you to share your screen, Brennan.
Good evening. Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate the introduction there. I'm Brennan Marks. I'm the owner of Marks Engineering. Some of you may have heard of us, but we're a small engineering firm here in Canandaigua, where we're located right off 5 and 20. We focus a lot on new construction, or I should say, construction or projects around Canandaigua Lake and the greater community. We do a lot of residential work, and we do a lot of stormwater management. So we figured this would be a good presentation to do for the Watershed Association and help inform the public. So about myself, I have a degree from Alfred State and also from SUNY ESF, ultimately in environmental and civil engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I have over 20 years experience just in the construction and also engineering, from large commercial projects to also residential projects. When I was growing up through high school and college, I worked on a lot of residential sites around Canandaigua Lake, both installing septic systems and on-site wastewater, but also doing site development and getting ready to build new homes. At Marks Engineering, we emphasize, or should we focus on site plans and also wastewater treatment systems. We also do a lot of stormwater management for both residential sites, and we also do commercial stormwater management for larger commercial facilities and parking lots. I'm very familiar with the Canandaigua Lake and the Finger Lakes region. I grew up in Middlesex. Well, actually, I grew up in Potter, and we spent a lot of time on Canandaigua Lake working, and also spent a lot of time on Canandaigua Lake fishing and just enjoying the lake in general. We have I myself, we live in just Farmington, just south of Palmyra. Yeah, I have my wife and 3 kids and 2 dogs. There they are in the picture there. I'm an avid outdoorsman. Spend a lot of time in the woods hunting and also fishing. So the today we're going to talk about stormwater. First I'm going to talk about what is stormwater, do a little bit of definition, a little bit of explaining there, what the pollution is of concerns, talk a little bit about regulations, uh, what we can do to control erosion and sediment during construction, and then get into the site design aspects that we can do to enhance our new sites or retrofit some old sites with green infrastructure, which will include infiltration systems, filters, grass filter strips, rain barrels, pervious pavement, landscaping, um, and and then we'll also talk about things we can consider going forward. So, so what is stormwater? So stormwater is, by definition, runoff generated when precipitation from the rain and snow melts flows over land or impervious surface without percolating into the ground. So that's just a general definition. But over here, I got some pictures here. So if the big thing about stormwater is if you've got an open lot, it's grass, it's trees, rainfall is going to fall on it. Most of it's going to soak into the ground and go into groundwater or run off slowly to streams or water courses. But when we develop these with parking lots and buildings and other impervious surfaces, we get runoff. We get stormwater runoff, and that runoff doesn't have the opportunity to soak into the ground. It doesn't have the opportunity to be taken up by the vegetation and clean it of its pollutants or nutrients that it's running off. So just a general, just a rule of, I should say not a rule of thumb, just to try to make light of the situation. So if you have a half acre of lawn area, um, in a 1 inch storm event, you're going to get approximate 4,000 gallons of runoff on a nice 1 inch storm event. If you have a half acre like house site, which is 30-40% impervious, you're probably going to get 12,000 gallons of runoff. So you're looking at like a 300% increase there for that 1 inch storm event. So that is like a general just kind of a magnitude of how the runoff will be affected if after you develop a site. So how do we preserve the lake quality or waterway quality given the increased development? That's what we're going to talk about today. So sources of pollution, sources of stormwater pollution. There's erosion sedimentation, which is when the ground surface is eroded away and washed into the water course. That could come from construction activities where you're disturbing the ground. Like for instance, over here in this picture on the left, you've got a lot of erosion of stockpiles and dirt that goes right into the streams. Agriculture, obviously, you've got a lot of runoff off of fields that are being tilled. That we're not going to talk about that today. You've got natural erosion, right? You've got large storm events which erode stream banks, and we're also not going to talk about that. That's a naturally occurring erosion. We're talking about is the developed sites and what kind of stormwater may be coming off of your house site or a new parking lot. So impervious areas uh, will are a big contributor to stormwater pollution, where you've got pet waste, you've got fertilizers, you've got motor oils, detergents, chemicals, litter, which is on those impervious surfaces. And then that just basically gets washed off in a storm event and gets into the nearest storm drain and ultimately the lake. So I took this table out of the stormwater or the Canandaigua Lake Watershed Association's 9-point plan. And at the top line there, it's got that residential and commercial. So basically, they're saying is what the study is saying is that 9% of our phosphorus loads are coming from these residential and commercial sites, whether it's be construction or the developed sites. That's 9% of our phosphorus load. I understand it's less than some of the other phosphorus sources or nutrient sources, but it's something we can focus on very easily, and we can reduce that number. So, um, so when we develop a site, we follow regulations, right? So there's for most regulations as far as stormwater goes, there's two main categories. There's a quality, the water quality treatment, and then there's also a retention uh, criteria where you're trying to retain the water on the site and slowly release it. Water quality treatment is basically using plants, filter media, or even soil to uptake some of those nutrients or pollutants and treat the water quality before it releases off the site. So we're not going to talk about large projects such as commercial developments or subdivisions in this or in this presentation, but they are a regulated discharge for stormwater. They're very heavily regulated actually by the New York State DEC, and we do a lot of those permits. But small projects such as new houses, additions, renovations, driveways, they're not regulated at the state level. There is a couple towns in the watershed that I know that actively manage or actively regulate stormwater discharge. Gorham and Canandaigua being the top two. Every site plan that's being reviewed by most of the municipalities around the lake, they do have the concerns of drainage and stormwater, but I know that Gorham and Canandaigua have specific criteria need to be met. So most towns have a temporary, we call it temporary erosion and sediment control requirements, which means that they got to have silt fence and other ways to capture or just control the erosion from the site during construction. So most towns are implementing that, but they're not implementing, I should say, they're not typically enforcing or implementing those post-construction stormwater management devices, which we're going to talk about in the next couple sections. So, construction, sediment, and erosion control is a big issue. It is it it it, it is a very high source of pollution, mainly in silts, which silts do carry nitrogen and phosphorus. We know. So there's things that need to be done during construction to control those from getting to our waterway. The biggest thing you'll see is silt fence. I mean, you should see that on just about every construction site around the lake, or just in general. You should see silt fences. Check dams, which down here on the left, they control silt in a waterway. Actually, the check dam here is a silt sock, but you can see how it's controlling the silt as it's washing off the site. Sediment traps, they're usually on larger sites, typically aren't on small residential sites. Inlet protection, meaning if you've got a storm drain or a catch basin near your house, you're protecting that inlet during construction, whether it's just with a filter fabric or a silt sock or something can stop that water from going into that silt from going into the catch basin and allow it to filter out before it goes into the drain. We also like to see sites during construction be stabilized with seeds, temporary seeding. Put down uh, a layer of temporary seed that may not be the final surface, but you want it to grow green while you're building it. So that's stabilization with vegetation. A big one we see is track out. We see it all over the place. You can see a picture over here where you got any kind of mud on the roadway. If anyone sees track out, they should be calling their local code enforcement officer because that instantly washes off and goes into the nearest storm drain or ditch. Just in general, we try to limit disturbance during construction. And then another one is concrete washouts. Every time you pour concrete on a site, concrete is very high in contaminants, whether it's caustics or silica or other pollutants in that concrete. We want to capture that in a contained area and allow it to dry. and cure before it is hauled off the site or otherwise disposed of. But there's, code enforcement has is a duty to monitor some of these erosion sediment controls for construction sites around the lake. But there's a lot that they don't see or aren't following up with. So um, they, as a citizen, you have every right to report anything you see as far as track out or silt water coming off the site to your local code enforcement officer. Um, so as far as site planning goes with uh, for stormwater, um, this I'm going to talk more about like what we can do as far as our plan or overall development, as far as post construction stormwater, like after everything's built, what we can do to help limit the nutrients or the pollutants from getting to the lake. One of the big things we try to do is just disconnecting our downspouts, our gutters. Um, they obviously want to flow 5 to 6 feet away from the building. They want to dump onto the ground, but having them dump into a grass or a landscape bed or an area that can handle that water actually helps put that water right into the ground almost immediately at the source. And also that the grass areas will take up a lot of a lot of um, the pollutants and the nutrients and the stuff that may be washing up to the downspouts. Um, Reducing our impervious surfaces. I mean, if you don't need a large driveway, cut it down. I think in general, everyone tries to do that when they design their sites because they, want to pay for the pavements. But there is things you can do for like overflow parking or areas that need to be driven on, but don't necessarily aren't driven on every day, which is reinforced turf, right? Where you could put in layer of stone beneath the turf or beneath the topsoil layer and help reinforce that area, but all so that you could drive on it occasionally, but also keep it as a grass surface. In general, just more plantings, more vegetation. And then the last one here is maintaining our buffers. I put up a little not to pick on German Brothers at all, but I just saw this because um, maintaining a buffer between our impervious areas of the lake. So up here at the top, this is bad, right? So you've got German Brothers, their impervious area right into the lake. There's no buffer. It gets better here because you've got the seating or outdoor picnic area, and then before you get to the lake. And then if you go all the way south here, this is undeveloped, obviously, but this is really good because this is on a native natural buffer that's between the road and the lake. And so the maintaining those buffers is actually is very helpful because the trees and the vegetation in that buffer area will take up a lot of the storm water. It'll take up a lot of the nutrients, and it'll also control the erosion as water runs off into the lake. So better site design is something we strive to do right off the bat, just with planning and maintaining our buffers and making best use of the site. So there's green infrastructure for. See if I can get that out of there. Hang on. Well, I can't. So green infrastructure for small projects, retrofit or retrofits. So that's one of the things I wanted to focus on with this presentation is what can you do as a homeowner on the lake or homeowner on one of the streams or tributaries? What can you do to help reduce your stormwater footprint and help reduce the pollutant and nutrient load that's going into the lake? So or if you're building a new site, you'll see some of these things that are implemented. And you'll understand why we're doing that and what we're trying to achieve. So we'll talk about rain gardens. I know it's a buzzword. Everyone kind of talks about it. Let's put a rain garden in, and they're very helpful. They're a really great retrofit. They look awesome. A lot of times we are as when we're designing new sites or doing retrofits or renovations, we're also doing infiltration trenches, which work the same way as your septic system. Basically, water goes in and it percolates into the ground. Um, Grass filter strips. Those are common. We're going to talk about pervious pavements. We're going to talk about vegetation and tree plantings. I have green roofs on here. They are a green infrastructure practice. I'm not going to talk about them too much. They have more of a commercial application. So there's very limited green roofs in the residential. And if you need to talk about it more, I'll be glad to answer offline questions. So the rain gardens, very simple. Your downspout or roof leader or even a culvert or drainage pipe coming out site goes out across the ground and into an area which is depressed, which is lowered. It's designed as about a foot, 1 to 2 feet deep. It's got a bunch of wetland planting mixes in there. It's got usually some type of a mulch, whether it's hardwood mulch or stone mulch. Um, you've got a 12 to 18-inch filter media, and then you've got a collection area, which is usually gravel, where it percolates into the ground. And if you don't have great percolation, or if you don't have great soils for that to be absorbed in the ground, often we'll have an under drain in there to siphon that water off the bottom of the practice. But the biggest thing is it's being allowing it to filter through a sand media, filter media, which we know sand filters, like we use those for septic systems, they remove a lot of our organics and our nutrients and filter the water. They're very easy to install. They're very attractive. If you typical 2,000 square foot house needs about 100 cubic feet, um, which is about a 10 foot by 10 foot area. It's about 2 foot deep. Obviously, you've got grading outside of that. Average, I mean, I should say a rough order of cost would be about $10,000 to put one in. Obviously, site specific. If you've got a lot of grade to work with, that's going to change. But they're relatively easy practice to implement. I even had to, I was looking it up and I was like, wow, learning more about rain gardens myself. And I came across this old house had a great article about how to put one in. They showed you how to dig it with your own shovels and put in the media and everything. And so I actually put a link up here to it. So if you can do it on this old house, then anyone should be able to do it, right? So on the left here is a picture of kind of, I don't think it was the one from this old house, but this is a beautiful rain garden here, and they look very attractive. So I figured I'd put that link on there. And this, so again, this would be a great retrofit for any existing house site that has like a 10 by 10 or 10 by 15 area that they're not using. They want to make it look really attractive, but also serve a purpose to filter stormwater. This, like I said, infiltration systems, we do a lot of these for new construction and renovations or additions. Um, the the purpose of an infiltration system is basically capture water off the roof and put it into a holding vessel with enough time to hold that average storm event, which is we keep referring to a 1 inch storm event, which is the average storm event. Capture it, hold it, and allow it to perk into the ground. This is a dry well. Very dry wells are very limited footprint. You don't see them. All you'll really see is like a cap on the ground with maybe a graded inlet, or maybe just a flat, smooth cap. They won't necessarily uh, hinder your space to use your lawn, but they do work. Um, Infiltration trenches like these other pictures here, which is basically just a stone void with a perforated pipe that transports the stormwater into the trench and it holds it. This one here is on Fallbrook. They have a really small footprint. This is probably about 15 feet wide by about 10 feet long. And it's just a infiltrator chamber is the same thing we would use for a septic system. And the gutters are piped into there so it can leach out into the ground. Um, so this shows it with stone to the surface. They're not necessarily required to have stone all the way up to the surface. You probably in most cases, you would put topsoil over the top and plant it and let it grow as lawn. Um, Sizing, we're looking for like a 3 foot by 60 foot trench for an average house, 2,000 square foot. They're approximately $5,000 to install one. There's very little maintenance. Dry wells, we usually do 2 or 3 dry wells per house because they're a smaller practice, and those can be $2,000 to $3,000 a piece. Um, The grass filter strips is basically separating your impervious areas, like your parking lot areas, from your storm inlet or the waterway or the place where all the stormwater is eventually going to end up. Um, they're very inexpensive. Usually, we just incorporate a separation area in our design. We're not going to put the catch basin in the parking area if we can. We're going to allow that parking area to sheet flow off over a grass area and then eventually get collected in the drain. Um, they can be grass mowed and maintained as lawn. They can be planted with all kinds of landscaping, and they can look like a landscaping feature and look very nice. This one down here is a bioswale. Um, this is capturing water coming in from, it looks like a parking area, and it filters through a bioswale and then eventually gets into an inlet. It's just another form of a grass waterway slash grass filter. Um, we usually integrate those with new plans. They can be retrofitted, but mostly it's new sites where we're trying to plan for that disconnection. The rain barrels, they're awesome. They're very small. They're very inexpensive. They don't typically provide enough storage to capture for the average storm event. They're more capturing the smaller events. But they do allow for water reuse, which is which is which is great. The recycling. If you probably would need one of those at every downspout, and it definitely will help. I know that the Watershed Association does a lot with those, so that's good. Pervious pavements. Typically, these are on new site developments. They can be retrofitted. We have a kind of a menu of things to choose from. We've got porous pervious asphalt, which is down here, where you've got an open graded. Actually, it's just an open binder course, fine binder course for the whole depth of the asphalt, but it allows water to soak through it. You've got a porous concrete, which is over here on the left. Um, it's just a concrete absent of all the fines, and it's a special mix, so the water can pour through it. And then pavers being one of the more common ones, where you have an open interlock paver, which sometimes grass grows through, sometimes it's just stone that the water can or the storm water can soak down through. One I don't have a picture up here is grass pave, which is a reinforced turf that can be driven on. These are typically more expensive. You've got to basically install a driveway underneath of the surface of where you're going, basically a full depth 12 to 18-inch thick stone layer beneath your pavements. They're 10 to 20 bucks a square foot roughly. They can get very expensive. Some of the drawbacks are they're difficult to maintain. If you have a pervious asphalt or porous concrete, you've got to typically 1 to 2 times a year you should try to vac those out with like a sweeper truck. They're great for areas of little traffic, right? So you don't have like a parking area or an overflow parking area. Also walkways are great for walkways. um, Snowplow concerns on the pavers especially, they can tear them up pretty quick. They'll also tear the surface of the porous concrete and the asphalt. Salts in the silts that usually come with road salts. We'll plug these up quickly. Um, Another thing to mention about pervious asphalt, the problem is it sounds great, but asphalt you should really seal every few years in order to not to deravel or spall. So if you go sealing a pervious asphalt surface, likely it's not going to be pervious anymore. So, um, so I'm going pretty fast here, but landscape plantings, uh, we will specify kind of planting zones. We have a lower zone, which is going to be your wet zone, which we want to put our wet feet, our plants that can have wet feet and they tolerate being wet, which are your switch grasses, your button bushes. We also, and then there's a moderately wet zone, which is going to be a little bit higher than that. Those are your more of your upland species or emergent species. We always like to use native species. We don't like non-natives or invasives, especially. There's this table here is from the DEC handbook where they specified some of the native species that they recommend. Um, so things to consider, you know, the stormwater, the biggest thing with stormwater is the impact on the lake, right? The phosphorus loading. Um, we were trying to reduce that so we could reduce our algae blooms, reduce the runoff, keep as much on site as we can, promote as much groundwater recharge as we can by focusing that into the ground, to percolate into the ground. So some of the stormwater retrofits they're very easy to install. They're relatively inexpensive. In The dispersed treatment. So if you don't have like a central stormwater pond for the whole subdivision community, dispersing that treatment to all the little residential sites, so everyone's got a rain garden in the front yard, is actually a better treatment practice than it would be having that central stormwater pond. You're going to get more recharge. You're going to get more treatment on there. It's actually going to look better. So we call it dispersed treatment. Um, the same thing with like wastewater treatment. We try to have septic systems all over the place versus one municipal plant. Um, Things we can do as a community to get involved really is that public awareness. Understanding what happens to your stormwater, where it goes, what it does. But it really is. It's a paradigm shift here. Like, when we are doing site plans, some of our clients or some of the people that are involved will look at like, wow, why do I have to do stormwater? The lake's right there. We just pipe it out and it goes away. But really, the thing is, it's your stormwater. You created it, right? Otherwise, if it was just a grass area or a forest or a brushland, you wouldn't have that stormwater. So you created it, so you really need to own it. And if you gotta that mentality is not in a lot in some of the homeowners or some of the community members. They just want to pipe it to the nearest roadway or pipe it to the nearest stream or catch basin and let it go be someone else's problem. So that's something we need to do as a community just to bring light to that. Um, you know, I say public reporting. I guess that's more on the construction aspects. Like I said, if you drive past a site that's got dirt on the road or no silt fence, mention something to the local code officer. Uh, we can do, we can help them do their job and reduce our pollutant loads. Um, some of the local regulations for new construction, like I said, there's the town of Gorham and the town of Canandaigua have a pretty good program enforcing that through the site plan review process. We could probably do more for more projects, and they don't have to necessarily be on the lake, but with an emphasis definitely around all the waterways or the drainage courses that do contribute water to the lake. So, and maybe not just the new homes, maybe it's for the small additions or just um, renovations that may need a permit. Um, there's possible grant funding out there for stormwater retrofits through the New York State Environmental Facilities Board. If I just did some quick math, there's about 500 lakefront homes on Canandaigua Lake. If each one of those were given $10,000 for a rain garden, it'd be about a $5 million bill. But maybe that's a grant that someone may be wish to go after, and maybe that could help us uh, add some more of these practices around the lake, especially. But we also need to consider areas around waterways, whether it's Sucker Brook or Fallbrook Park, Fallbrook Lake, Fallbrook, or some of the other major tributaries. The you know the, there is options for funding out there. There is an opportunity to do some of these retrofits on these various lots. So, and with that, I'm closing up pretty early, Lindsay, and I'm sorry. I should have slowed down a little bit, but I have time for some questions and answers.
No worries. That was great. I know we have a couple questions already in the chat box. So let me pop those up. Let's see here. And feel free, folks, to pop some more in there. We have quite a bit of time here for Q&A, and obviously you know where to contact Brennan if you have things that pop into your mind after. All right, so from Kevin, we have, why is Seneca Point Ravine runoff so brown with silt during major storms? The upland boundaries of this area are mostly woods. Not sure if you can speak to that or not, Brennan.
No, I think so Seneca Point Ravine. Yeah, I think I know which one that is. Um, and if it's mostly wooded area above it, I mean, that's natural erosion. That's where you've got overbank flows where the streams are, well, let's see, I'll go back to I'll go back to that picture where you've got, sorry, it's going slow. So like, so where you've got a 10-year storm, which is about 3.5 inches of rain, you're going to get this overbank flooding. And I'm not saying that's what we got like recently, but um, or even the average storm, you'll get overbank flooding where it's eroding these banks. And my guess is Seneca Point Ravine is probably doesn't have a good shale bottom or a good natural stone bottom. So these silts are closer to the bottom, so it's more sensitive to erosion. But I would say that's natural erosion. It's we're not going to go up that stream and fortify that and try to stop that. That's just something that's not uncontrollable.
All right, thank you. All right, AJ asks, has there been any consumer interest in rainwater capture and household reuse for homes not on public water?
That's that's great. That is a good question, and I would say not recently. However, we have come across a lot of old cottages with cisterns. So that was a way to do it in the past, was capture your rainwater and use it in the house. Most every system nowadays, everyone nowadays has a lake draw, lake pump, or municipal water, and so water is relatively easy to get. Right, we have electricity, so we can pump it. Back in the day, they had to use hand pumps, so that was a very common thing. But no, not as of recently. The health department, the New York State Health Department has a big. Um, uh, they don't necessarily want to see water for reuse because it has a potential to get someone sick, and that would be probably more in the commercial and public water supply realm. But yeah, it has not been. They have not seen a lot of interest in that. It's a good thing though. It would be a good thing.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see from Ben. What permeable driveway surface is best for plowing?
That's a very good question. The let's see here. the the best one, which is the least common, is going to be porous concrete, in my opinion. It's a rigid surface. Um, However, it's very expensive and it would be very hard to place. You actually put it down with a paver. Oh, there you go. Most commonly, I mean, second to that would be pavers. Um, Again, I have not had a lot of experience with asphalt, previous asphalt, but I tend to shy away from that. And pavers, plowing with pavers, you need to inform the plow driver that they have to use shoes on their plows so they don't tear up the pavers. And most plows don't, and they'll grab an edge of a paver and rip it out.
All right, thanks, Brennan. From Tom, how is water from a roof different from rain that falls directly into the lake?
Uh, well, that's a good question. Well, before there was a roof, it was a grass area. So that water was able to get captured into the grass and recharge into the ground. Obviously, water falling directly from the sky into the lake um, that's the roof water would have more organic debris, such as leaves and dust. It doesn't seem like pollens. There's obviously animal waste on your roofs the asphaltic shingles are a petroleum-based product usually. Um, and you're increasing, you have, more nutrients that way, more pollutants.
Let's see. From Hugh, is agriculture subject to any runoff regulation for pesticides, fertilizers, and silt? And if so, who regulates?
I don't know the answer to that. So all I know is that the Watershed has done a great job trying to implement devices around for the major farmlands. Obviously they have to follow USDA, but I don't know if they have regulations for pesticides and fertilizers. That wouldn't be my area of expertise.
Okay, that might be a question for Ontario County Soil and Water. So we
Yeah,
good one. And I think we answered this one. What permeable driveway surface is best for plowing, right? We covered that one. I think that might have been
yep,
from Kathy. Are there measures that can be taken to protect steeper slopes by adding plantings or other measures in addition to managing stormwater from the site?
yes, very good question. So every time we have a steeper slope, we typically, what we specify, one thing is a steep slope planting mix, which is you got a lot of crown back and other vegetation that handles that has a deep root system, but also adding some some shrubs or some woody mass on that slope is very helpful. The This is where I wish I had my landscape architect. He could spit out a bunch of different species to put there, but we also use structural practices, whether it's a retaining wall or a geotextile fabric, which will guard the slope. The big thing with slopes is if it's bare soil and it can't support, if it's too steep to support vegetation, the bare soil is not going to weather well. It's going to get the runoff pretty quickly. So we need to fortify or we need to armor that face of the slope, whether it's with vegetation or with stone or with some other type of practice, so that the water doesn't get to that silt or that soil and erode it away. Also, slopes or soils would like to live at a certain slope, whether it's a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1, different types of soils. If you got a too steep of a slope, there's not much you're gonna. I mean, other than structural practices, you're not going to stop it from finding its natural angle of repose.
All right, thanks, Brennan. Okay, from Annette, I have a 45-gallon rain barrel that overflows with every storm. It has a 1.5 in overflow valve that
Mhm.
allows da daisy changing, daily daisy chaining of barrels, and my brick wall gets soaked. Any suggestions on what I can do?
Yeah, so that's a good example of rain barrels. They're great. That daisy chaining barrels is great. You could add lots of storage that way. But I think you gotta like that any stormwater discharge needs to be at least 6 feet away from the edge of your house. So those like especially this rain barrel picture here. Oh, I can show you where this is bad. Is because well, this overflows right here, and the building is right behind it. So you're basically putting that water straight down to your foundation. So you're going to have water problems. And if you open the bottom, or if this was an inch and a half outlet, it would still be way too close to your house. So you really need to get that piped away or funneled away from the foundation. We usually try to be 6 feet away with any discharge. Um, and then you might, if that didn't fix it, then you might have a groundwater issue or a drainage issue in the foundation.
Thank you. From Jim, are pet waste a problem for stormwater runoff pollution?
Yeah, they are. They're probably one of the top contributors for an urban or a suburban community or a community like Fallbrook Park or Fallbrook, which has a lot of very close um, houses. And if you don't pick up your pet waste, it's definitely getting to the lake.
Yes, for sure. We know for pet waste, if we think about animals that in the wild, their diets are very different from domesticated pets. So there's a lot more bacteria and things that could be dangerous to get into the water. So good question. From Ben, I'm sorry. If time only, would be interesting to hear about agriculture from home and you.
Um, I don't see that question. It's not up here. Could you repeat it?
It sounds like if there's time, would be interesting to hear about agriculture. I'm not really sure what that means. Ben, did you want to specify? It says from home and you. Maybe just some thoughts on agricultural best practices, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll let him maybe clarify his question. We can go on to Lynn's question.
Him and so from you and me. Um, let's see. Do you have anything specific you'd like to ask about that, Ben, in regards to agriculture? I'll let you type that in there and I'll read Lynn's question here. Lynn asks, runoff from a roof is not filtered and falls with more velocity as runoff, which causes more erosion than water and rainfall that falls from naturally. Maybe that was more of a,
That was a good response to the other question about um, roof runoff. Yeah, I mean, as soon as you concentrate the water to a downspout, it's coming out with a higher velocity than it would be if it was falling directly on the ground, and that does create scour and erosion in most cases. So
yes. All right. From Jim, is climate change causing more rain events, especially heavy rain in our region?
I can't answer that. Obviously the 100-year storm seems to be showing up more often. So something is changing. I don't know what it is.
Thank you. Just to go back to Ben's question, Ben, I know we're going to actually be having a presentation at the end of April from Ontario County Soil and Water. They're going to be talking about a lot of their projects throughout the watershed that can help protect water quality and stormwater and soil health as well. So you're asking what can be done, what the state does, interested in its proportional effect and actions for association. Um, can you speak to any state regulations on that at all, Brendan? I don't know if you,
For agricultural,
yeah,
um, no, agricultural is just widely. It's not a regulated use. Agriculture, I mean, it's farming it. That stems back from a long time ago where you don't fight the farmers. So no, I can't. I don't know much about those.
okay. Um, like I said, we have a presentation coming up from Ontario County Soil and Water. They actually have an upcoming soil health workshop at the produce auction on March 28th. So that might be something if you're interested in learning more about, things that farmers can do for best management practices to, keep soils on the farms. The Watershed Council does a lot of projects as well to help mitigate any of those effects. So those are great resources to reach out to, but I can connect with you a little bit more offline if you'd like, Ben, on that. And no worries about the typing. And then AJ is asking, how do these management practices, missed that, 1 second, change when there's little distance between soil surface and water table?
A very good question. So yeah, water table. And I think I have this. I think the drywall or the rain garden shows it a little bit. Yeah, we have to maintain separation right here, a 24-inch separation between the bottom of our practice and our water table. Well, that mostly comes into a rain garden or an infiltration trench practice where we try to stay above that. That can be as little as 12-inch separation. But when we see a high water table, if we know that the lake elevation is pretty close, we'll probably go more towards a grass filter strip or not an infiltration practice, or something that's more of a surface practice versus doesn't have that large that filtration media and that under drain. So we would focus more towards the surface practice.
Great. Let's see, do I have another one in there? And it looks like I have one more from Jim. He's just saying great presentation, lots of useful info. And oops, I missed. I just popped in some other ones there. Lots of info and tips for individual property owners. Thanks and keep up the good work. I second that. Thanks from AJ. Lynn is saying wonderful presentation, Brennan. As always, I have a rain garden, interesting to watch at work all year round. So glad you are involved in this community. Awesome. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions, folks? Oh, here we got another one from Ben. Are swales ever built on public land, or does government ever buy small parcels for swales?
That is a good question, and I think so. We're looking at the municipal approach or the community approach. Yes, the watershed. I don't know. Kevin's very involved in it, but they have purchased corners of fields all over the watershed, or sometimes whole fields, and they put in these large basins. You know, there's one up on the top side of Sucker Brook here on County Road 30. Bobby Johnson's land there. There's a huge retention basin there. There's one on 5 and 20 as you go towards Bloomfield. There's several on uh, 364 going south on East Lake. They've put a lot of these settling basins in. They're basically dry facilities. They capture the water coming off the fields or upstream, and they hold it as long as they can before it flows.
That's awesome. Annette, they make little septic tanks for household pets. Do they actually help, or do all the nutrients get to the lake anyhow?
I don't have much experience with that. If you are going to put in one of I know what you're talking about. If you were going to put one of those pet containment areas in, you would want to make sure that the bottom of that containment is like that 2 foot separation above your water table. And then it would work similar to a septic tank, although you're not going to have the water in it. And it would compost. It would be a composting area. So I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I would definitely want it to be above the water table.
I've never even heard of that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Any other questions, folks? And again, Mark's or Brennan's information for Mark's Engineering. They have a great website. So if you ever have questions, you can reach out to them, or we can direct you that direction. Um, this was an awesome presentation, Brennan. Really appreciate your time putting this together. Very informative. A lot of things that are just great projects and things we can do within our watershed, at home and in the community. So again, this presentation is recorded. We will make this available to folks. So if you missed some things or if you wanted to dive a little deeper, and if you have follow-up questions, please reach out to Brennan. I think no more questions popped in. Just lots of things coming in from folks. But otherwise, I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you at presentations coming up in the future. So reach out anytime you have any questions, please reach out, and have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me do this. Yep.
Thank you, Brennan.
Bye.